Hi, I'm Alistair Shipley. Driven by the beliefs that everyone has something special to offer, I created Not So Average, the podcast that proves that you don't need to be in the top 1% to be truly extraordinary. Each episode spotlights everyday people from your community, the very individuals you might pass on the street. These relatable stories reveal that whether you're a jack of all trades or a niche specialist, we all have unique experiences and valuable lessons to share. Imagine if we all took a moment to realize we're all not so average. Let's get after it. Welcome to another episode of Not So Average, the podcast. I'm Alistair Shipley. I wanted to start off by thanking everyone for all of the support that we've been receiving lately. The comments that I've been receiving, the personal messages I've been hearing from people in the community have really been fueling me to continue with this podcast, and I really appreciate it. I do want to mention though too, if you do have the opportunity to share this, like it, subscribe, help us get it out there. It really broadens the community that check out Not So Average and this podcast. So thank you so much. Okay, so with that, I want to introduce our guest for the day. I'm thrilled to have Lisa Davis with us. Lisa is the founder of the STEM Innovation Academy, a trailblazing charter school that's redefining how we prepare future leaders in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Her vision has transformed education by merging innovative teaching with real-world challenges, empowering students to be creators, not just consumers of technology. Beyond education, Lisa has achieved remarkable success in the commercial real estate space and as an entrepreneur, she has founded Bright Studios, which she successfully sold to BrightPath. Her diverse experiences, proven track record, are going to make for an amazing conversation. So thank you very much, Lisa, for joining. Welcome.
Well, I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. So I was mentioning before we got on camera that this podcast was in part because of a conversation that I had with one of your board members that then later led me into talking at your school. So 2022, I was asked to come and speak to, at that point, I think you had just around 500 students.
Yep.
Okay, I was brought in to come speak to these students with the request from Jen Aubin that they have a guest that's a little more relatable and could talk about the direction of tech and could be that bridge between the students and their parents. And I was at middle age. And she said, hey, we need somebody that's relatable. And I sat there and I was like, okay, does this mean that I'm average? Because she phrased it as, hey, we need somebody that's not a CEO, not an ex-Olympian, somebody like you. And I was like, shoot, does that make me average? But so here we are today.
Yes. Wow. That's awesome. It feels like a minute ago and yet like a long time ago. It's been dog years in terms of what we've done over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was the first year of that academy, was it?
That was the first year in our new high school. So in that new building. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I was like the fourth person to speak at that point in time.
Yes.
There's some big shoes to follow in too.
Yeah. That Future Ready lecture series was really, we thought was an important piece for our students, so that by all means the academic portion is important, the options courses and that, but actually understanding how things work in the real world and hearing from people who've been there and had some achievement and success in unique areas. And so it was a real fit. And I did like I remember once somebody saying to me I had a portfolio resume, which I thought was a nice way of saying I've done a lot of really unconnected things.
Okay.
And I remember listening to your story thinking, he has a portfolio resume too.
I appreciate that. I'm going to probably start utilizing that. I have a portfolio resume. It has a nice charm to it. I just distinctly remember after the talk, because my conversation points that I was trying to bring up was that especially with tech being the forefront of the school and how quickly it adapts, you have to identify what your North Star or your values or your characteristics that make you unique, really cater to those skill sets, and then also put an emphasis on learning, because you're going to have to, or you're going to get tossed to the wayside. I remember I was walking around the school with you. You were giving me a tour, and a student, a really anxious student, came up and just said, hey, how do I improve my communication? How do I start talking to more people? And he was shaking, like his hands were clamming when he shook my hand. And that has always stuck with me. And I just said, hey, buddy, like doing what you're doing, like putting yourself out there and just going against the fact that this was obviously something that was nerve-wracking and just going after it. And he said, what books do you recommend for me? And that stuck with me it's been a couple of years, and I've thought about it quite frequently.
Yeah.
You got some great students.
And we do, I think our students think that they see speakers and they're polished, and you assume you started out that way. And when I started my career in commercial real estate, you're trying to build your network. I used to go to networking events, and I would first have to go into the washroom and just remind myself, just ask questions about them. It'll be fine. The worst that can happen is you don't meet anybody. And so we try to impart to our students that it's just a muscle and you just have to practice. And that's how you get better at it.
That's amazing. So were you doing the power stances in the mirror? That's a pretty common thing I'm finding. Like literally hands above the head, just like I'm powerful, like mantras are being yelled out.
Yeah. Something like that. Because really I'm an introvert at heart. I'd really rather just be at home with my family.
Thank you for doing this then.
So it definitely just became a muscle, and you just realize with practice and you figure out how to talk to different people. So we actually, at the school in grade 7, every grade 7 student has to take what's called STEM talks, which is public speaking. And so we really want to start that early, and so that they develop those skills, because the ability to communicate is just a number one skill, regardless of what you're doing in your life. And some students love it. Not everybody loves it when they start, but by the end, they even grudgingly admit that
it helped.
It helped. Yeah.
Oh man, there's all these studies that indicate like people, they would rather like amputate a limb than doing public speaking and stuff. So I like the fact that you're just getting them early, making them realize it's actually not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And also the message of like communication is going to be key. I even said at my talk that even with the developments of AI and all these technologies and VR and AR and whatever, you name it, people are still going to be at the forefront of all of that. You still got to work with people.
Yeah.
Still got to learn those skills. You've built a remarkable career. So you called it a portfolio resume, from success in commercial real estate to founding and successfully selling to Bright Studios. How have these entrepreneurial experiences influenced your approach to education and the leadership at the STEM Innovation Academy?
I think my entrepreneurial ventures have really been probably at the end of the day somewhat rebellious. So the status quo, I was never that interested in the status quo. When I started in commercial real estate, I was the first woman that Avis & Young had ever hired. And I was asked if I wanted...
In that division or in
the company in Alberta.
Wow. And
I was asked if I wanted to sell retail. And I'm like, no, I want to sell industrial. Like, I'm more interested in warehouses and things like that. So there was always this, probably within me, a piece of why can't I do that? Mm-hmm. And so I moved to Toronto, where I ran the national real estate program for Quiznos. At the time, they were the fastest growing retailer in the country. And again, I was about one of 5% women nationally at that level. And then as things do change when you have children, and I had my daughter, and all our family was back in Alberta, so we gave it up, came back, and I was just spending time at home.
Wow.
And then it was around this time that parents were lining up at 3 a.m. to get preschool spaces. And I remember thinking, what is going on? Why don't we have more? And as you started to look around, you began to understand that preschool operators maybe weren't the best business people. And so landlords were actually really struggled to rent to them, because you don't want to be the landlord shutting down the childcare facility. So my real estate background really helped. I opened a preschool and recreational facility, and we doubled in size the next year. I had no background in education at that point, of course, but I was smart enough to hire good people. And then Brightpath came knocking, and so they wanted to take what we were doing and expand this model across their 50 locations. So that was fun, and I did end up selling, because looking after small children is a very serious responsibility, and it was very hands-on. And so I had the opportunity to either continue on and expand, but hire somebody for the day-to-day management. And I decided I think I just wanted to release the responsibility that I felt. And it was around this time that my 6-year-old son was going to be forced to move to 4 schools in 4 years. There was this Calgary Board of Education was making some bad decisions around their accommodations. And it was around this time, too, where I started looking into where money was going into the classrooms. Why was I being asked to fundraise for smart boards? Why was I being asked to fundraise for science materials? Why was I being asked to do all of that? I started to become, having just sold the company and had some time and interest, and started looking at what the problems were. And as often is the case when you look under one rock, you find others. And we started an advocacy group, actually, that did a lot of work in this amazing group of women. We were just volunteers trying to raise issues around things like math.
Okay.
So 40% of kids were failing math. This was at the height when they were bringing in...
Here in Alberta? In Calgary, or...
Here in Alberta. Still today, 40% of kids fail grade 9 math in this province. We just don't talk about it anymore. And so at the time, Discovery Math was being driven into the schools. It was damaging kids' ability to do math, their confidence in math. Jeez. And so we decided that I probably did 100 media interviews over a 2-year period. I was on Danielle Smith's radio show a number of times. I was usually quoted in the Herald. And so while it drove some change, it didn't really drive change. Yeah. So in a fit of public service, I decided to gather up a group of people who were like-minded and run as a slate as trustee for the Board of Education.
Okay.
Definitely the worst job in politics, but this was going to be my public service to try to do things better. And for our family, public education's been so important. Both of my parents grew up poor. My mother was one of 9 children in Vegreville. Her father was an alcoholic, and she used to kind of joke that they were the last house to get indoor plumbing, when she was a child. And then my dad lost his father when he was 5. And so Granny was left with 3 boys under the age of 10 with no life insurance and really no safety net. So my dad went on to, my Granny was going to get those boys to university, and my dad became an engineer and was able to provide a really good middle-class life for us. So public education really does need to be the great equalizer in society. It's very important that it be done. And so I did get elected in 2017.
Saw that, yeah.
But we were one short of a majority. And so it was quite something to observe over the next 2 years. I was not well liked by administration, as you can imagine. I'd been fairly critical of where they were spending their money and the lack of results. We quickly ran into problems in the first month when I simply asked for the private board meeting minutes of the corporation for last year. I wanted to prepare and understand.
You just asked for the meeting minutes.
I asked for the private board meeting minutes. And at first they told me they belong to the other trustees. And I said, no, corporate records don't belong to trustees. They belong to the corporation. And I am a director and officer of the corporation. So then I found out that they, in fact, had, because I'd made that request, got a legal opinion confirming that they did have to give them to me, but they never told the trustees. So this just set up a massive opposition.
The chain effect on this.
Yeah. So it was, and so this is where I really began to understand why, just from a governance point of view, the large boards why nothing ever changes.
Okay.
And the reality is it's a $1.4 billion corporation. I was the only one with any financial expertise on the board. I was the only one with any legal background on the board, and they ended up being highly reliant on administration. And public facing, it just became more important that there was no criticism of CB than we did our job. So it was after 2.5 years, the minister had actually publicly called for an audit of CBE.
Yeah.
The administration had played chicken with the minister, threatening to lay off 300 teachers. And that was 2019.
Okay.
So the funding formula changed, and it got leaked from the CB that we were going to have to lay off 300 teachers. And of course, we knew in the boardroom that was not true. And the administration let the rumor sit. It didn't.
Festered.
Yeah. And so the minister called the bluff. The Sunday night before, so trustees were to meet with the auditors, and the Sunday they called an emergency board meeting where I called the board chair and I said, what is the meeting about? She said, oh, it's just about the audit. And I was meeting with the auditors the next morning at 8 a.m. And so they ended up passing a secret motion, again, which I thought was really, it wasn't bad governance. It was definitely bad governance. It might have been illegal. And essentially, it required that all trustees have legal counsel present when they meet with the auditors. Now, my position is I'm a duly elected official representing the people of Calgary, and I decide who I walk into those meetings with. So they passed a motion, meaning that I had to comply. And so I resigned the next morning in front of the auditors and told them I'd be very happy to meet with them now that I'm no longer a trustee, and I did. To be honest, 2.5 years, I think I spent more on legal fees protecting rights I had in law against this board than I made as a trustee.
How did that play into kind of how you're doing, your approach to your leadership now at STEM?
I think we really, there's a very common theme in education, and particularly within the Calgary Board of Education, is just the utter dysfunction and the lack of trust they have with leadership. Mm-hmm. And so there's actually a staff survey that showed that 80% of staff don't like and don't trust senior leadership within the board.
That's incredible, and not that public.
And that was public, and that was when I was a trustee. And in any other private corporation, that CEO would have been terminated for those kinds of results. So what was really important to us when we started was that we speak the truth, we have fierce conversations, we can have arguments and disagreements, but at the end of the day, you walk out of the room in alignment. Mm-hmm. And so people had the opportunity to say what they needed to say. And this was going to be really important because there's a whole culture shift in education that really needs to take place. Mm-hmm. And so everybody would tell you that they're evidence informed. That's not the case. 40% of grade 9 students fail grade 9 math. And this is horrific. This tells you there is a major problem. We gathered up what was evidence informed practice in teaching. We supported our teachers with a daily prep, which is almost unheard of, so that they could work together.
What's a daily prep?
If you teach 6 courses at junior high, one of them you're not teaching, so you have time to prepare. Okay. Because one of the things that happens in education is teachers show up, they close their doors, they're not given any resources, there's no common professional development within teams. And so you end up with a couple of things. And one is that I've often thought, and again, I'm not a teacher, teaching always seemed to me to be a lonely job, right? Yeah. You've got your one person in the classroom. And so we wanted to have an environment where teachers, A, had subject matter expertise, that B, they understood what research-informed teaching practice looked like, that we gave them time to work together in grade teams. So all the grade 7 math, for example, planned together, all the grade 8 social studies planned together.
Is that a different approach than normally found in the CVV?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
So you may find that in individual schools with individual teachers, but as a kind of requirement of being in the school, it's not.
It's not a practice. Okay.
It's not a practice. And then the other thing we do is we have common assessments. So all grade 7s write the same math unit exams and the same midterm and the same final. And what's really important about that is a couple things. One is that we are using best practice on our assessments. So one of the things that was shocking to me is probably 80% of teachers have never heard the word blueprinting.
Okay. What is blueprinting?
Blueprinting is where you take you look at your program of studies, right? The things the Alberta government requires us to teach, and then you make sure that your lessons are related to the program of studies and that your assessments are related to the program of studies. It's actually the law. The law requires you to ensure that your assessment is only on the curriculum.
Okay.
And when you blueprint, you take a look, you make sure that you're assessing on things that are in the curriculum, you ensure that they were taught, and then you also ensure that you have a variety of questions, easy, medium, hard. This is how the provincial exams are done. This is how the diploma exams are done. And we actually brought in a teacher who used to used to teach this at the University of Calgary, this
Okay.
blueprinting. So it makes teachers better at their main job, which is, teaching the curriculum, because they understand, they work for it and understand what the outcomes are. And then what it does for us, these common assessments, does for us as a leadership team is it allows us to take a look at a unit exam and say, let's look at the marks. And if they're low, why are they low? What do we need to do to adjust? And so we had that situation in our second year at the junior high around November. We just weren't seeing the results we would have expected. And because teachers have the same exams, then we know it's just not a variation of one teacher to another.
Wow.
We did a little bit of regrouping and did some remediation and got them on the way. So this going back to how leadership informed the school, what I could see at the board was that there weren't these kind of standards, there weren't these kinds of opportunities for teachers to improve their practice, and nor was there the accountability. We're a very kind of high-driving organization, but with lots of support.
Okay. Interesting. That was a lot for the first question, so I might have to redial what we do for the next couple, but that was really informative. And it answered the question of what drove you potentially to starting the STEM Innovation Academy. It seemed like you got to look under the hood, and then you also had your own children, and you're seeing how, metrics like the 40% failing grade 9, obviously a change had to be made, and you took it upon yourself to do that. Is that a safe assessment, or?
Yes, and then the pandemic actually. Like when I resigned from the board, I thought I was done with my education advocacy. And then the pandemic hit, and I knew we were witnessing a major shift. And so our kids weren't learning about really any technology topics. They weren't learning about artificial intelligence. They weren't learning about digital prototyping. So I just felt those who can should, and I could start a charter school, and so I did that. And with a co-founder, Sarah Bieber.
Maybe could you talk to that a little bit, because just the success and the build out of this whole. Because how many schools are a part of your program right now that you've created?
So we've got two sites in Calgary, and then we have a school in Edmonton.
Okay.
And so come this September, we're going to be offering a new junior high program at the high school site. So by September, we'll have 1,700 students in Calgary and about 400 in Edmonton.
So all started around 2020?
So 2021, September 2021.
So even shorter. That's incredible how quick you've now taken on 1,700 students. That's studying. How many have graduated out of your program?
So this year will be our first grade 12 graduating class.
Something we're celebrating for sure.
Yeah.
One thing that I personally wanted to hear you share, maybe now is the time or maybe later, but maybe share about what the biggest challenges were for you starting the STEM Innovation Academy. There's one that plays in my head because of the tour that I had with you after my speech. You talked about how funding for the building that you wanted to move into was a big factor, and you took it upon yourself. You took a lot of initiative. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, but I thought it was a really cool story about how you came to be in the Alistair Ross Technology Building.
Yeah. It's ironic, out of all the things I personally bring to the organization, my real estate background is one of the most important. Because historically, charter schools take over old, tired buildings in either of the two public boards. And of course, as everybody knows, we're a bit of a space crisis.
Yeah.
So we did take over for the junior high Catholic school, elementary Catholic school. It's a nice little school. But in the high school, there was nothing available, and I think the department suggested that maybe we just add a couple of modulars onto the school, and that was not my vision.
No.
I actually ended up contacting the Premier at that time, Premier Kenny, and said, look, if this is your idea of choice in education, I'm out. I'm more than happy to tell people there's actually no support for this. So he was supportive. He did commit to helping ensure we had a high school location.
Okay.
So back in August 2020, actually, was the first time I toured the Smart Technologies building. We were just putting in our application for a charter school. So negotiated a lease deal, put it in front of government, and who turned it down? And they told me to go work with the Calgary Board of Education and find a school. And I said, that's very funny. That's never going to happen. And they don't have any schools. And so it took the department. We were the first charter school to open in 20 years. So there were
20 years.
In 20 years. So there were a lot of, I would just say, outdated thinking and understanding as to the challenges charter schools face within the department. And so they did come around to the fact that there weren't any options. It took a year. We eventually got approval to do this lease. So spring of 2022. And we were very close. We'd negotiated a deal with Smart Technologies. There was one condition to be removed, and in March of that year, Smart decided not to remove the condition. We were left high and dry. We had told parents we were opening that September. As it happens, I happened to be meeting with the president of University Properties Group the next day. And so I said to him, we are desperate. What do you have up at in the university area that we could move into, even on a temporary basis? And he was amazing, and the deputy minister was amazing, and the minister was amazing. And so they all supported us in getting a very quick lease deal done in the Alistair Ross Technology Building. And so we announced in May, hired, again, that would have been the third school in 3 years. We opened on 90 days notice.
90 days notice. So you found out that you're going to get possession, and then you set up a full educational business for students to arrive in the fall.
We hired teachers. We renovated the space. We got a building permit, got the building rezoned, and renovated space, and took in students the last week of August.
Jeez.
It truly crazy. Nobody has ever done that in education, and we did it 3 years in a row for 3 different locations.
So I would say that because of your experience in the real estate industry, especially with commercial, that played into this ability to take that on. Somebody else that would have had a completely different background would have been like, no, we're hooped. We got to wait till the following fall to hit this. I think like this is a perfect example for the podcast of like what seemingly looks like not irrelevant, but an abstract past played so strongly into the direction of this now successful school that you're operating.
And the fun was going to continue because we had a space for our grade 10 students, but we didn't have a space for them to move into grade 11. And so I was irritated with, I knew that Smart Technologies wanted to sublease, they wanted to get out of their lease. It was owned by the largest pension fund in the country, and I was irritated, obviously.
Is that OTPP?
HOOP, yeah, Ontario Hospital or Health. I'm sitting there. It was the best building. It's an amazing building. Like, it's beautiful, full height windows. It's like being at a tech company, not a high school.
It felt like Silicon Valley the first time I walked in there. Yeah. It felt like a mega campus.
So that summer, I put in an offer to purchase for this building, and I can't disclose the purchase price, but it's between 50 and 100 million, basically with no money down and an 8-month conditional period. It's the worst offer ever. And
sounds like a Hail Mary offer.
It was a
just lob it into the pile.
It took a little bit of convincing, but this was not an asset they wanted to own. None of the pension funds want to own office buildings in Calgary anymore. So it gave me enough time to then go to government and say, look, we have a crisis because these grade 10 kids have nowhere to go. And the commitment of this government was to supporting choice. And the STEM program is in the ministerial mandate orders of both post-secondary and education to continue to increase the STEM programming. So government did get on board, and in December they took over the purchase of the building, and so government owns the building. So we basically, it was all told, building and renovation, about a $90 million project that I put together. It created 2,000 students. There'll be other charter schools there. But again, out of desperation and back up against the wall, along with the mission of like kids' education was at risk.
Yeah.
So it was fortunately compelling, and government was supportive. It did take a bit, but...
Incredible. So I'm going to change course. It's still going to obviously follow into discussions on the STEM Innovation Academies, but like cultivating real world learning, I wanted you to explain STEM Innovation Academy emphasizes preparing students as like innovators, critical thinkers. How do you integrate real world challenges into your curriculum to foster this mindset?
So one of the things we think is, there's a couple of things we think is important. One is that we do expose our students to a wide variety of opportunities for learning, and so they can make an informed decision beyond grade 12 as to things they're interested in. So if you take a look at, in our innovative engineering course, for example, students will, one of the projects they do is design a Formula One race car. Yeah, small size, obviously. But they have to do the design in Fusion. They have to do some.
So that's a software tool.
So that's a software. So it's like CAD. It's the new industry tool.
Yeah.
Or the common industry tool. They do some modeling in software, and I'm sorry, I don't know which particular software that is. And then they have to create the cars. So they're using our 3D printers, using laser cutters, using our soldering station. They actually have to create a model of the car, and then they have to test it. We have another project where we give students a piece of wood. They've got to design the lightest and strongest tower that they can. So again, they've got from a single piece. So they have to create this, so it's more of a civil engineering task where they have to create this piece, again, using the design software, using the modeling software, and then we test it with a crush plate. So we're actually testing the crush force till failure. So again, it helps. So we have these projects like that give them exposure to just building some skills that will serve them well whatever they do, but also just to help them understand what different industry areas may be like. Same thing, we have a very extensive robotics program. We have 180 kids in robotics clubs, and plus who are taking all of these courses. So amazing. One of the things we're doing this year, I was down visiting MIT, and I was meeting with they offer some high school programs, so I was meeting with those folks. And they're telling me about this autonomous car challenge that they have, and I take a picture of the Coral AI, and I text it to my STEM director. I'm like, Denzel, do we do this? Do we have this? And so a week later, we've got the AI piece that MIT are using. And so again, autonomous cars is a great example of certainly coming at consumers in our lifetime. We will be driving them.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
How many of our kids will be involved in creating it, I don't know. But again, it's just exposing them not just to skills, but to applications. My son in junior high was at a different school, very good school, but their computer programming was create a random number generator. There's no satisfaction in that. Like, that's coding for the sake of coding. Yeah. As opposed to with us in the junior high, our kids start with code this to make this LED light go off and on. So we do more physical. So we try to relate it to a more physical challenge, something that they would do in real life.
Is this, okay, so these kind of applications or projects that you're having your students involved with, is that led at all through kind of industry conversations that you're having with maybe potential employers 4 or 5 years down the line? Are you talking with like big players to figure out, hey, where's your shortcomings in terms of people coming into your workplace? How can we better gap that? Or is it just like, I guess where I'm trying to come from is who's giving you the ideas for the top types of software? Like you just indicated, we're not using CAD anymore. This is the new player. Who's driving that?
So when we started, we actually had a meeting with industry and post-secondary. We gathered, it was a group of about 10 or 12 people that we gathered together to say, here are the strands we're thinking of, because we obviously want to have some sort of way that we can build upon skills they learn in 10, 11, and 12. We also have some courses that I would just say are one shot. Like space science. It's a one-shot course. If you think you're interested, take it, and then you'll have to go on to university and do it. But so it was actually industry that came back and gave us some direction on some things. And a great example is we thought we would do some programming virtual reality.
Okay.
And industry came back and they said, actually, what we use is augmented reality. It's much more applicable for training. And remember, we were just coming out of the pandemic. So one of the companies we were talking to, which is a company here called Exergy, I think they're the largest 3D manufacturer in Western Canada.
Wow.
And they said, when we had this $500,000 3D printer coming over from England. You couldn't travel during COVID, so we actually got augmented reality, and this is how they did their training.
Yeah.
So here's how something like that evolves in our school. So we buy a $4,000 AR goggles. Denzel, our STEM director, gets it set up. We're not sure what we're going to do with this. In the meantime, we've got a student who's super interested. So this was 2 years ago. He was in grade 10, really interested in this. So he took it, started programming in it. Last year, he programmed this entire game in augmented reality. And so, of course, we don't have any advanced skills in AR, so we took him over to the OC and to one of their profs and said, can you help advance him? And the prof said, not really. So Jason, for his capstone project this year as a student, is creating a course that we can teach using augmented. The student is.
The capstone.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So some of it is by design, I would say. Like we think and we're unique. We have 7 engineers on staff who also have teaching degrees.
Okay.
There wouldn't be another school in the country that has that. So we do have people with some unique background. But we do go out so we've gone out to Adibotics. I know you had a chat with Jen Aubin. So our students go out to Adibotics, and they're kind enough to give us a real world problem for our students to work on. So again, it's not just we're doing robots so we can do robotic competitions, but here's a real world application. We have another group we're talking to who's big in the AI space in terms of the data, the computing behind it. And of course, as you have these, they have to be super cooled, right? So these computers, they're looking to develop a robotic arm that will take the material in and out of a super cooled environment. So while I'm not suggesting our high school students are going to come up with the answer to that, I think they've engaged some serious robotics experts on that. But that's a challenge we'll give to our students for them to develop those skills.
How often is it industry coming to you because they want to work with your program, and how much of it is you reaching out to them? Is it a combination of both? It's a
combination of both. And I would say one of the things we struggled with early on is we had all these great ideas coming in, and it's, okay, which one do I do?
Yeah.
and
they're also shiny.
They're also shiny. And then it sounds easy to say we're going to take innovation in industry and post-secondary and bring it into school. It's not easy. You've got to figure out what you can do with the skill set of the students that you have, what meets curriculum outcomes. We're still offering high school credits. There's a rigor around that. And then creating teaching materials so that it's not just that one teacher that can teach it. It's any of our options teachers, our science teachers can teach that. Building out a system is quite intensive. We are just in the process right now. We've decided to revamp. We have an external technology advisory committee, and so this is where people in industry that we're looking to help tell us where we need to go.
How many people are on that?
So it used to be there was about 10 people on that, but from a variety of industries. So what we were finding again is folks would say, you should talk to this person or do this. And we're like, it was hard to operationalize. So what we're doing now is we're picking 5 areas that we're focused on. We're going to have subject matter industry.
Can you share what those 5 are?
Yeah, so we just put the final touch, so hopefully I can remember them.
Okay.
So robotics and quantum computing is one of them. Artificial intelligence and quantum computing is one of them. So that will obviously be more application-based. The second one is robotics. The third one is entrepreneurship. And we want to move away from the build a product, sell a product to...
Dragon's Den approach.
We've done that, but the big challenge is kids don't have a lot of robust ideas, and necessarily, and which is fair because they're 15 and 16. So what we'd like to do is to teach them how to be technology investors and teach them how to invest in technology companies. Because if you understand what the investors are looking for, when you do have your idea, you have a pathway.
Interesting. So that was 4, or are you counting quantum and AI
so quantum and AI,
robotics,
entrepreneurship, medical innovations.
Oh, cool.
Is another one. So that's another big area actually in Alberta. It's a young industry, relatively speaking here. And then the other one is energy. So we have a lot of energy innovations in this province. So what we want to do there is to take 4 or 5 industry experts, a post-secondary expert in that area, a student, and a post-secondary student. And we're going to give them a framework that says, what are the moonshot ideas? What are the current innovations? What's just beyond our reach? And come back to us with really a business plan around how we would implement that, complete with resources and context.
I'm jealous this didn't exist when I was in school. Probably wouldn't have spent so much time in the principal's office, to be honest. But I think wow, that's incredible. I actually wanted to ask you more of an opinion, then we'll dive into it a little bit more. Obviously, AI is rapidly changing industries quite a bit right now. What are your thoughts on the impact for the STEM education, and how are you preparing students to use the emerging technologies responsibly? We've seen there's a lot of pushback that kids shouldn't be utilizing AI. There's a fear around AI. There's actually even Arizona just said that they're going to start pushing curriculum through AI. I don't know if you saw that article at all.
No.
So their education program, I wonder if I could pull it up, but basically the Arizona school curriculum is going to be taught with AI. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on all of this.
Without knowing the article, I would say that's nonsense. But look, one of the funny things about education is we have these waves where technology is going to change everything. Smart boards are going to change everything. And the industry in North America invested billions and billions of dollars in smart boards. You cannot point to a single study that shows there was any outcomes.
Now you're in their building.
And now I'm on their building, and we actually don't have smart boards. We use TVs.
Oh, man.
So I would say, and again, this idea, I think people I could talk about, will say, you can have personalized learning. I think one of the things that the pandemic really taught us, explicitly and clearly, is that the value of a teacher in front of a student cannot be replicated.
Yes.
It cannot.
No.
So where we're going to be using AI so there's a couple of things. One is what I would consider to be the ethics of AI. Students should, and we'll probably do this in social studies actually, what is AI? What is a large language model? What data do they use?
It's interesting to me, the fact that you're saying that we're going to talk about a technology, but it's going to be introduced in the manner of social studies.
Because the issue around ethics and policy really belongs in a mandatory social studies program. So, for example, we just had a conversation this last week. DeepSeek came out, this Chinese model. It knocked $700 billion of value off of NVIDIA. We've got President Trump has signed executive orders around artificial intelligence being a major focus. So there's a lot going on. And Canada's kind of respectfully nowhere in this. And education is even worse. There's one mediocre artificial intelligence course at high school. We taught it last term. We're fixing it. We're doing a different job this term. But there's 2 pieces. One is that ethical framework, the policy framework. And so what is an LLM? How did they acquire the data? What bias do they have? So I've said in the school, we are not using any Chinese-based AI.
Okay.
When you go on for 2 reasons. And one, when you go on to DeepSeek and type in Tiananmen Square, it doesn't exist. Okay?
Wow.
So that's just a propaganda. And also because of the way that they track data. China as a surveillance state. We are going to be teaching our kids, first of all, we're going to be teaching our kids what that means. Some of them know, some of them don't. But then ourselves, we are only going to use ethical AI programs. So there's that piece of it. And then there's the other piece of it. We're really looking, even in English language arts, the idea that we can say, you can never use ChatGPT. Schools are going to spend endless cycles of trying to catch cheating. You can run it through your Turnitin software and it's 90% accurate. Can you suspend a student of 90% accuracy that they cheated? I don't know.
My friend's a professor at the university and he wrote his own paper. So he's in economics. He actually taught one of Jen Aubin's daughters and he put it in as a tester. His own self-written thesis was claimed to be plagiarized through that software too. So at that point he was like, how do I trust like what is AI versus what is mine? Like it can't even detect.
Exactly.
So
we're trying to figure out how we have AI, where AI might be helpful in some prompts, for example, but the body has to be written by the student, or we're doing it in class assignments. So
do you have to show this is the body of what I originally and this is the finished thanks to AI, or?
So this is emerging, but one of the things we're looking at, for example, is to say, as part of your work you turn in, show your prompts, right? Show your prompts, show what it came out, and then we'd like to see how that impacted your final. Because it is going to happen. Any assignment that a student can take home is going to be subject to that. And then we're going to probably offer some bonus marks if you don't use AI. So there's
incentives to not.
So that's in the humanities, but then in our more technology-driven company. So for example, we have a video production strand. We are still going to teach students the fundamentals of video production, how to do this with normal software, I'll just say. But then we will also incorporate AI video creation software. They still need to, these are still tools that they're going to be using as they...
For the robotics, for the coding.
Even First Robotics, which is the largest robotics program in North America, they're bringing in no-code robotic challenge next year. So it is the way that things are going. So that for the students who are interested in the technical side, they will certainly learn some of those use AI applications in those certain ways. But we do want everybody to understand the broader policy and implications so that as they go on in their life, they can begin to have some background knowledge to help inform the decisions they're going to be making as adults.
Interesting. So not necessarily the same, but in the premise of how it's being regulated, I think is worth me bringing up and asking your opinion on it. So you might have heard down in Australia, they're putting a restriction on the age for social media. I think they put it at 16 years old. Anybody beyond under that is unable to use social media because they're indicating that there's a lot of studies that show that it impacts your development and all this stuff. Do you think that they should be putting parameters on things like AI and putting age restrictions on stuff like that? Or are you of the opinion we just teach them how to use it properly and ethically, like you were describing, and that should be enough? Like, where's your stance on that kind of stuff?
I think there's a line at a certain age. They should be able to do that, and so they should be able to use AI in school. We'd also like to open an elementary school. So people have asked, "So are you gonna have technology in kindergarten?" I'm like, "No, we'll have no technology until maybe grade 5." There's other skills. When you look at the brain development and what is required for skills, that's why they're bringing back handwriting. Handwriting actually changes neural pathways in the brain that set students up for success later on.
So what are those pathways? Maybe
that's probably getting too technical. That's too technical for me, but I've seen a research presentation around this, and there's a lot of evidence about how it improves the fine motor skills and the mind body helps develop. So whereas my kids can't read my handwriting, hopefully my grandchildren will be able to do that. So I do think there is an age where it is not appropriate, and one of the things we really need the provincial government to step up is around this, because right now what you have is each individual school board struggling with what are the policies, what is the research, and so these are individual efforts. by and large. And so this is an area actually where I think the Alberta education's gotten quite caught flat-footed.
Okay.
And the big metro boards will be fine. They got lots of money and lots of resources. But for smaller boards, taking classroom dollars to out of the classroom, because somebody's got to develop the policies, somebody's got to do the research, somebody has to do all that. So I think that's where we need a much different approach from a regulatory point of view, if for nothing else than to help gather up what are the best resources. Because the other thing I'll say about education is the education quality, the research. The quality of research in education is exceptionally low.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Okay.
So when people say studies say in education, I'm like, it probably wasn't a very good study.
I can't wait to actually bring this up with a few of my friends that are teachers and stuff. One of the most popular podcasts I had, I don't know if you had an opportunity to check out any of the episodes before, but he was a teacher for the Catholic board. He really took off, but he's got some, I'm curious what he thinks about that comment, and it's probably right on par with what he would believe. Some other questions that I want to ask. Diversity in STEM is a critical topic right now. How is your academy kind of addressing that inclusion, and what changes do you hope to see in the future regarding, say, women and unrepresented groups in STEM?
So first of all, with women, we're 55-45 in
Awesome.
Men to women. We don't, and that's not by design particularly. Yep. So I think there is, certainly in the traditional sciences, there's a lot of women. I'm not sure what the data would be at the universities, but overall in universities, it's 60% women these days, 60-40. Mm-hmm. In engineering, although engineering I think as a whole is just under 30%, chemical engineering would be overweighted for women. Biomedical engineering is something like 80% women. So it really depends on the discipline. No surprise, less women in mechanical engineering. I don't think those are necessarily bad things in themselves. I think that women, like men, follow their interests. I think we don't complain that there aren't more male nurses. I think there are areas in technology that men just gravitate towards more than women, and that's okay. In terms of diversity, our populations would be more diverse than the city population. So we actually...
Is that because of where all your students are coming from, like necessarily one community? They're coming from everywhere.
We come from all over, yeah. So and we're a lottery, so we don't pick students. We don't pick students based on their academic achievement. It is not an algorithm. We were accused of having a weighted algorithm. It is an Excel random number generator.
Oh, wow.
To come to our school, you just need an interest in STEM.
Did your son create that with his experience in software? No?
Yes, that's right. He could have actually. But no, I think it's one of the most basic functions in Excel.
Yeah.
But so in terms of, there was an associate dean at the U of C who said, we have diversity of thought here. And actually, I think this is what we really need to be moving toward. And so we do have, I would say, a great diversity of thought within our school. We have a great diversity of experience. We have a great diversity of student, both in terms of where they live, what resources they might have at home. And we come back to that, the comment I made earlier about public education needs to be the great equalizer.
Yeah.
So when they come into our school, we treat them as the individual that they are. We don't make any assumptions based on any of their immutable characteristics. And if they're interested to learn and willing to work, then
welcome.
We'll help them take them as far as they want to go.
That's awesome. I like that question. I did some personal research before this, just getting myself familiar with the landscape before obviously having a guest on. Ironically enough, I connected with somebody that is an awarded teacher for the STEM education from the Alberta government, and I often crowdsource a little bit, and I'm like, what questions should I be asking? And there was a few in here that she had given to me, and I'm glad she did. So changing topics again, just the vision for the future. So how have your experiences as an entrepreneur and a leader influenced the vision for the future of education, and particularly the STEM fields?
I think When you're an entrepreneur, if whatever you're offering has to be wanted by the market.
Yeah.
And so that's our guide, right? And it was ironic. I had a co-founder. She spent a year with the school and then finished her psychology degree, and she's a child psychologist. That was her passion.
Okay.
So what was my point in saying that? Oh, yeah. So she was a teacher, actually. She was a high school teacher. And so whereas I wasn't worried that parents would find us, I was worried that we'd be able to hire staff. And her being a teacher, no, staff are going to come. She was worried about our parents going to come. And
so you had different concerns that were complementing almost.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
You weren't worried about her concerns, and she wasn't worried about your.
And it turns out we didn't have to worry about either one of them. But you have this, and when I look back, we do a presentation for new staff every year, and it was a presentation we did our first year. And when I look back on that now, I'm like, oh, dear Lord. We're basically like, math isn't very good, quality isn't very good. We have this kind of vision around STEM, but it wasn't particularly well developed. And you contrast that with where we are today in our fourth year. It's just leaps and bounds above that. So we just had an open house on Thursday night for our high school. We had 1,100 people. So that's our second one. Our first one had 1,000 people.
Jeez.
So we've turned away about 4,000 students. So for me, and that's not a point of pride. Terrible.
That you can't accept all of them.
It's terrible, and ironically, everything I'm doing here, I wanted to have done it in the Calgary Board of Education in 2017. And we'd be happy to work with any board that wanted to drive this programming in. We've got school boards from all over from Western Canada that come to see what we're doing. But so the entrepreneurial piece is, are we doing the right thing the right way? And so we look at our academic achievement, we look at the breadth of our programming, we look at the impact it has on students. Do students in their grade 12 year, do they look back and say, I never would have thought I was interested in that, but I did it and now I am. And so
how do you assess for that?
I think so we do annual student surveys. Okay. Actually, and I think and so one of the ways with our first cohort of grade 12s, we actually want to track where they end up after grade 12. So
you've been doing that?
We will be doing that.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then also industry, the conversation we have with industry and post-secondary. We've been talking a lot with universities about the gaps they're seeing. Okay. Students coming in. And I mentioned I was at MIT. So even MIT, the number one ranked university in the world and the mecca for science and innovation, they said they had to create a new first-year engineering course because students coming in didn't know how to use Fusion, they didn't know how to prototype, they didn't know how to use laser cutters or 3D printers. And they said, do you do that? And I said, yes, in junior high.
Wow.
So the fact that we're on the right track, so there's a bunch of different ways we're looking for that validation, because at the end of the day,
you just got the highest level of validation there when MIT is impressed that you're doing it from a junior high education level.
That was
4 years ago.
I have to say it was pretty, and there's going to be more coming with MIT. Yeah. So I think as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for that. Is there a customer, and are we doing a good job? And how do we know we're doing a good job? And so we spend a lot of time internally looking at those things. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about this revamped tech committee that we're reconstituting, is because, as you can imagine, opening 3 schools in 3 years on 90 days notice, plus a school in Edmonton, it's been a bit
stressful?
It's been a bit much. You talk about what are the threads in the careers that you've done. My threads are startups and major expansions. I get a kick out of that stuff.
It's amazing though.
But now we're trying to build systems around that so that they're not dependent on any one individual.
So you can replicate and expand?
So that we can expand, but that we can also, like we were talking to another Alberta school board about hosting a common Alberta STEM PD day, where people, where we share out what we're doing, and not just by talking about it, but sharing out lesson plans and teacher resources. This is what's actually missing in education, are actual resources for teachers. Because saying to a teacher, here's the program of studies, or here's the course outline, you go find the experts in AI. You go find, it's hard enough when you're in the tech community to keep up with some of the stuff. And so how does a teacher who isn't living in that community every day, how do they keep up so that they're most relevant? That's the piece that's really broken.
I could almost picture you having an HR department not HR, like a hiring department that just has a plethora of resumes that you just hold on to for when you're ready. I can just see people reaching out to you all the time. Hey, do you have a space for somebody like me?
Yeah.
Do you get that?
We do get that. We probably have 10 applications for every. There is a teacher shortage in this province right now, but we don't feel that.
Okay.
Because we're, first of all, if you like what we're doing, this is the place to work. Is it. And we support, and our teachers get the support they need in order to do their job. And they do that in a non-politicized environment. So we leave all those social issues that so often are getting driven into schools at the door. Our teachers want to teach their subject, and that's what we allow them to do.
That's perfect. Where do you see the STEM Innovation Academy in the next decade? What impact do you hope to have?
If I were to look at big vision, would be we'll keep opening schools until there's no more demand. That's a slow process with government around capital. To really, our goal as a school was always not to be the biggest, but to have the most impact. And so we are seeing a need for something like a STEM Center of Excellence, which becomes a training ground for teachers who want to teach some of these programs, but they don't learn this in the teacher in the education faculties. That creates resources, creates lesson plans, creates assessments, and makes them available on an online platform for any teacher, any student in Alberta. Some of these courses we would want to move online. Again, the boards outside of Edmonton are really clear. They don't have the staff with this kind of knowledge. And many smaller communities struggle to find a high school physics teacher.
Wow. Never
mind somebody who's going to teach about what are the current developments in artificial intelligence. So we really want to develop a platform, an online platform that will allow that, and a way that we can help train teachers to do that. Because at the end of the day, the quality of education comes back to the quality of knowledge that the teacher has. And we have generally not done a very good job in this province of giving those opportunities to teachers. It should not be on the backs of teachers to finish a 4-year degree and a 1-year master's and then have to take a bunch of courses at NAIT or SAIT or on some of these critical areas that the Alberta government agrees based on a lot of the things they're investing in. This is part of the economic future of the province, and we don't have a very good system to support it right now.
We're getting close to the end. I actually only have 3 more questions for you. So looking back, how did you imagine your career path when you were younger, and how does that compare to where you are now?
So in high school, I wanted to be a paramedic, but then the sight of blood made me sick, so that was a problem. I probably was always interested in business. I would have gone into engineering if I'd had more confidence in my math. I had the marks, but just not the confidence. It was a classic female problem 35 years ago. Commercial real estate was really valuable for me, just learning how to sell something, and to do it, I was largely dealing with CEOs. So you learn how to talk to more senior people. So that was really valuable. I told my kids, you should go sell something. And by the way, you're selling all the time. You're selling to get a raise. You're selling to get a job you want. You do that.
You should put them in contact with me when they're ready.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know your philosophy, we're aligned in that way. But I think that if I would have done something earlier, I would have started working for myself earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I left commercial real estate as an agent, I should have we got married, we'd moved down here, we should have just gotten into development. And we didn't. And it was a much different game back then. Today it's very difficult if you're not big, but back then you could be strappy and entrepreneurial. But other than that, I wouldn't say ironically, it's ironic that Donald Trump is president, because I remember in high school thinking, I think I'd read The Art of the Deal.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, he doesn't seem that smart. Why couldn't I do that? And so in my mind, I was going to be this commercial real estate mogul, and I was going to own apartments, and some of the apartments I was going to rent to women leaving bad relationships.
Okay.
And life just didn't go that route. For me, having kids changed everything. And while my kids will be fine, my son is part of the first graduating class, but he would have been fine at the other school he was at. So it's just, for me, this has just been the public service, and having been able to sell my company to the publicly traded company was the big turning point in my life. And then you decide, what do I want to do tomorrow? Because
So how did you evaluate that? Because often I have guests on here that they had those crossroads, I want to call it, where it's just, hey, I have to make a choice. Maybe not so much make a choice, but they're trying to evaluate where they wanted to go with their lives.
Yeah.
And how did you sit down and evaluate that?
Part of it was like, how much money do you think you really need?
Okay.
And so, and don't get me wrong, acquiring wealth has certainly been a big focus for me, because it gives you options. I always wanted what I would call screw you money.
Yeah.
And as well for me, like when I had kids, that's when we went down to Toronto, because I wanted to be president of a real estate company at some point. And then I had my daughter, and I went back to work after 2 months, and I just decided she would start crying at 5:00. She wouldn't stop till I got home. And so at 18 months, I just decided, what am I doing?
Okay.
And for what? And so Alberta is such a great place to be an entrepreneur and to do different things. But when I sold the company, we really looked at, and we'd done some of this advocacy work. And so I had really two choices. One was, if I really cared about this, you had to be a decision maker. The advocacy, you could donate money to do stuff. It's actually not how you affect change. So that was the point. That was the decision I made, that this was something that was important to me personally to undertake. And I could certainly carry it on and made a lot more money outside of education than I have. And my big joke is, when I leave, I'm sure somebody will give me a nice plaque. It's a not-for-profit society. There's no upside. But I will have the satisfaction of having driven innovation for the students we've been able to reach.
Incredible.
I don't know I would have been that altruistic when I was 20.
Yeah.
But
okay.
That's where it's landed.
That's awesome, though. That is awesome. I appreciate all the perspectives on that. And I appreciate the bluntness, too. The screw you money was a driving factor, too. So other questions, I got two more. How do you personally evaluate what success looks like for you? And has that definition evolved as you've grown in your career and life?
Yep. So I would say, so certainly in the early years, when you're a broker and they put up the chart every month, like how much money you're making is definitely a measure of success. I think while like family has always been very important to me, I spend most of my time with family. And then when you have kids, and my kids one's in UBC engineering, one's in the high school, you just become grateful that they're happy. So my success, the most important thing in my life right now is just that my kids are happy. Because you look around and I look around at some of my friends who have kids that are unhappy, they have mental health issues. And it's not because of anything within the family, it's just how these things evolve. And so I just feel really grateful that my kids are happy. And I think that success for me moving forward is going to be that we continue to drive change in this province. I'd love to. Ontario's even worse with their math, so they could use
an expansion plan.
They could use a little revolution, but again, there's no charter schools there. So I think the thing where I talk a lot about within our team now is, what is our highest and best use as a principal? What is the highest and best use of our principal? And this administrative task that principals usually do, maybe let's not do them because you have a better use of your time.
Interesting.
And everything we're doing now is, what is the highest and best use? So for me, I think my highest and best use, getting out there and hustling deals, whether that's expansion of schools or signing MOUs. We've got MOUs in Edmonton with Nate and McEwen. We're going to have...
What's an MOU, for those that don't know?
It's a memorandum of understanding about how we work together. We have a very exciting project we're going to be announcing next month.
Can't wait.
Yeah, which will be the only school in Canada offering this kind of programming. So those are the things that I want to spend my time on. And 5 years from now, when I look back, I'd love to look back and say that we made a difference in the lives of these kids and helped change their trajectory in a positive way, that we were a small part of that. That would be success for me.
I like that. And the simple aspect of finding success in just your children being happy was pretty beautiful to hear. So thanks for sharing that. And then the last question that I have, what final advice would you give to aspiring educators and entrepreneurs who are passionate about driving change?
I would say find your tribe and find a place where your value is respected. Education needs a few more rebels.
Okay.
They don't fit everywhere. Find the people that share your vision and can support you. And for educators, I would say, man, if you go out and learn some of these more technology-driven skills and knowledge, you will be able to pick where you work for the rest of your life, because we'll never get caught up.
Thank you very much. And that, everybody, concludes the episode with Lisa Davis. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Once again, help us get this out there. Share it with your friends, with your family. I don't care who, your dog. Not So Average needs to be more popular. So with your assistance, we're definitely going to get out there. So let's get after it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.